This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 103.
During instruction, you got to go to your engagement strategies. How are you engaging kids in learning? I will tell you that something I've learned over the past 12 years is that whenever possible, I let kids work together. They want to work together. They want to have partners. They want to be in groups. Sometimes it doesn't work out well because of dynamics or their lagging skills, but they want to work together. So I will almost always let kids work together or have a choice about that.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my lovely co-host, Mr. Matt the Cabana Man Rogers.
Ooh.
Matt, how was your... That was a good one, wasn't it?
I do like that.
How was your tropical vacation? I did mention it in show 102 because I was recording that while you were on your tropical vacation, but in a nutshell, how was it?
You know, I won't speak about the Cabana Man in detail for, explicit reasons. I myself was well covered and enjoyed myself quite a bit, but it was exactly what the doctor ordered. I think I've talked about it before. My wife tore her Achilles and broke her foot over the last 2 years and has been pent up at home. Or at school quite a bit. So for us to be able to celebrate general good health and get away during a cold holiday break, it was fantastic for my social emotional status. There's a little, toss up for your transition, buddy.
Very nice. Yeah. So we had an awesome guest tonight, Wendy Turner. She's the 2017 Delaware Teacher of the Year. So we've had a lot of Teacher of the Years on, but she is our most past Teacher of the Year, I guess. I don't know the correct way to say that. Senior, yeah. We've had a lot of 2020s, some recent 2022s. Prior to that, it would have been Christopher Albrecht. He was 2018. So she's now our most senior. But the conversation was unbelievable. Matt and I, honestly, every conversation we have is just fantastic. We've just had so many amazing guests, but this one was really dynamite. She was succinct. She was clear. She was fired with passion the whole time. It was just a great conversation. What's probably your biggest takeaway from tonight?
I was honestly, so we spent a lot of time talking about SEL and, the structure of SEL and
in a way we've never talked about before.
Yeah. What is the root baseline that should be understood, should be, clarified. We talked about the difference between identifying the definition of SEL compared to how to integrate it. And, she talks about some resources, but honestly, the biggest curveball, I don't know about you, Ken, we went into the lesson lens, which we haven't done in a while, totally not SEL related. And that threw me for a complete loop. We spent quite a bit of time in this one direction, and then she absolutely knocked it out of the park for the lesson lens. That's another, little metaphor inside joke for later in the episode. So that's
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it.
I'm trying.
Everyone pay attention and listen for where the outside knocked it outside the park comes up. That was a nice little
I'll tip my cap. I usually have one on, but I'll raise the cap for that one. What about you?
Yeah. I would say the lesson lens. We haven't done it in a while. Sometimes it's just so hard for us to fit it into the conversation because we do try to be really cognizant of our time and keep our show as close to an hour as possible. It's so hard for us to get it under. And we a lot of times just don't want to cut the conversation off, and we ended abruptly with our exit ticket. But yeah, I'm so glad we went into it because it was awesome.
I think we both had this moment, and for people listening, we have a back channel chat going where we just kind of ask questions. Hey, I'm going next, and it was like we need to listen. This is like a priority. It's not a filler. We need to hear. We knew that there was going to be something special about the lesson lens, and boy, oh boy, did she deliver!
Absolutely. So without any further delay, let's hear from the Teach Better Network, and then let's jump right into our interview and our conversation with Wendy Turner.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Wendy. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me here.
For sure. We're super excited to jump into this conversation with you. So kick things off for us nice and simple. Officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of your journey and career in education.
Sure. So I'm Wendy Turner. I'm coming to you live from Wilmington, Delaware. It's basically a suburb of Philadelphia. And my journey is a really interesting one. Growing up, I never wanted to be a teacher. I didn't know any teachers. There were no long line of dedicated teachers in my family. And I really wanted to be a business person like my dad. Went to school, majored in accounting, worked in accounting and finance roles in big companies for 17 years. And then one day I was sitting in my cubicle doing a spreadsheet or something. And I just started thinking to myself, I really didn't want to do this for 20 more years. And we had a daughter. I was married. We had a 6-month-old daughter at that time. So I picked up the phone and I called my husband. I said, hey, what do you think about me becoming a teacher? And there was like this long silence. He did not drop the phone or hang up on me though. And he's like, sure, go for it. No problem. So I went to school at night for 4 years while I was working full time. And our daughter was 6 months old and our son was born in that time. But it was an exciting time of learning something new. And lo and behold, I came through it. And I became a teacher at the age of 40 years old, teaching second grade, which was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life.
So Matt probably knows the question is coming here, but I love when we have teachers that started their careers, their professional careers outside of education. Because one of my favorite phrases that you hear in classrooms is, well, in the real world, they're not going to blah, blah, blah. But most teachers went to school, went to college, went right back to school. We don't know what the real world is like. So in your time in the business world, in the financial world, what would you say are skills or assets that you built that you feel directly impacted the way you facilitated and worked with your second graders that other traditional second grade teachers never would have had the perspective or skill set to do with their kids?
So it's such a great question. I think that all of my life experience just brought me to the doorway of teaching as such a different human being at age 40 than I would have been at age 23. So I worked for big companies where I was treated well, I was treated poorly. I witnessed things that were great, witnessed things that were not great. And I just think that like soaking it all in and learning how to get through different situations prepared me for teaching. As you know, you have to make hundreds of decisions quickly during a day. And just being part of all those different environments and dealing with different personalities made me, I want to say, like a little hardier than I would have been as a young person. Of course, you grow in your confidence as you gain experience and things like that. But for instance, I used to be an auditor for the Walt Disney Company. So this one trip in my 20s, I had to go to England. I had to rent a car with the steering wheel on the other side of the car and drive on the different side of the road to get to my client. And I somehow did that without dying, and got through my audit job. And just going through these experiences where you're like kind of terrified, kind of excited. I mean, that's what teaching is, right? Like every day you walk in and you're kind of terrified, kind of excited because you don't know what is going to happen. You don't know what the kids are going to bring to you. And I think just having a lot of those experiences gave me, I'm not going to say I was calm all the time, but like this sense of like, I can do this because I've been through a lot already. And I think it also gave me confidence in talking with other adults, parents, families, administrators, because I think teaching is a lot for very young people who come in with few experiences, just even dealing with all those different types of personalities. So it definitely benefited me. And I definitely would recommend it as a second career for people who are looking for something rewarding and want a new challenge and enjoy working with kids. I mean, I can't get over the fact that 7 and 8 year olds are amazing and they crack me up and I love being around them, even though they're crazy sometimes.
So can you just kind of, talk about like it would make total sense to have this kind of piggyback off of Ken's comment to take this real world experience, business experience and transition it into, a business class at a high school level or, a good growth and development at that intermediate level. What drew you as a, not born and bred teacher to be like, you know what, if I'm going to do teaching and education, I'm going to jump right into primary with second grade. That's a huge shift in any, outside education into education, but that is a massive shift to go from, business to that second grade.
So that is a fantastic question. At the time that I went through this, I'll call it like a little evolution or transformation. My sister, both of my sisters had children. Okay, so now all of a sudden I have these young nieces at family occasions, and I just like them. Like they're funny, and I can make jokes, and they appreciate me, and you get like all the love and the hugs. And I just kind of started noticing in my own self-awareness that I liked that. Like I got something out of it. And I think for about 1 minute, I thought teaching young children might be easy. Like they might all sit at a carpet and like smile at you and do everything that you ask them to. And I thought like, well, maybe this will be just something that, will be kind of, I don't want to say fun and easy, but like doable. And of course that's what you think when you aren't a teacher because you have no idea what it's like. But I will just say that I really started to be around children more and like spending time with children and just kind of saying, like, that's weird, right? Here I am. I'm 35 and I'm a finance manager and I do budgeting and financial analysis and I understand accounting, but I like this. So I need to pay attention to this and see if it actually becomes like a thing. And it did.
If I were to ask just a kind of follow up, similar to Ken's question of that transition, what are attributes that you felt like were strengths in your business world that you saw in your second grade classroom? And what were things that you really needed to develop that even your additional training didn't prepare you for as you went into that new adventure?
So strengths that came from the first career into the second were being organized, were being able to communicate effectively. I think if you can do those two things, that's a large part of teaching. Of course, in my studies at night, I had to learn about pedagogy and child development and things like that. I think a big asset I have that many people have is that love of being a lifelong learner. So the minute I went back to school at night at 35 years old and I had to work all day, drive to a night class that I attended from like 5 until 9, I loved it. I loved learning. So when you have, I think, that mindset, that also helps you in the classroom because you might be trained in this or that. You might go in with your curriculum manual and be like, yes, I'm going to teach this math lesson and it's going to be great. But what you don't know is that even through the course of a 45-minute lesson, you're learning, you're listening and you're learning. And so I think me being a learner helped me connect to my students as learners and kind of draw these lines to what I was going through, to what they might be going through. And I immediately started to sense that social emotional learning was a very big part of the classroom and had to be embraced by me, although I didn't call it back then. I didn't know that was the name of it. But I had this idea that I had to teach kids how to be humans, like be successful humans, be humans that could, move and relate in a classroom, because if we didn't do that first, we weren't going to get to the learning. And I think that also came from that previous career.
What were some specific activities, strategies, lessons that you did with your students to teach them how to be humans? Because this is something that I reflected on and realized, even, now being away from the classroom as a coach, something that I really emphasized in my classroom was teaching my students how to be decision makers. I saw that as an extremely valuable skill in life in general, but also to be successful in my student-centered classroom. And so I did a lot of management strategies, activities, very explicit instruction on teaching them how to be effective decision makers. So can you give us something specific that you did with your second graders that worked on that human development?
Sure. So something that I saw the need for was for these kids to understand and appreciate each other, even if they didn't like each other, perhaps. So like that kind of adage, like you don't have to be best friends, but you have to be respectful and you have to kind of be able to get along with a big group of people. And something I did specifically, and I did this for 12 years, is that when it was every child's birthday, we would gather in a circle, and we'd go around and every single person would share what they liked best about the birthday child. So even if it's a child that's very well liked and has tons of friends in the classroom, or a child that might struggle socially or be shy or be an introvert and can't get themselves out there as much, every single child had the same experience on their birthday of being appreciated. And every single person had to go through the thinking of noticing and then articulating something that they like best about another child. And sometimes it could be things they had in common, like their sense of humor or their love of soccer at recess. And sometimes they were like, you have great headbands, or you're always on time. And so, and in this instance, kids weren't allowed to pass. Like sometimes when you're doing like an academic question, you can pass if you're not sure, but like you couldn't pass. So even if you had to sit there and take a long time and really think it through and come up with something, they had to do that. And that became a great tradition. And I invited families in so they could hear that, witness it. They would like tape record it, and they'd be like, I can't believe all these kids said these things about my child. And I said, yes, that's what we're working on in here. We have to be connected human beings that can see the good in other people and practice that. And then that made a difference in how they could do group work or get through, navigate conflict, or resolve problems in the classroom.
I want to ask a really quick follow-up specifically to that strategy, because I love that. And I can see the idea is perfect. It's something that I think every, especially self-contained elementary teacher, would easily be able to implement tomorrow. Is there anything that they should do to scaffold towards that before the first birthday? So what I'm envisioning is the unlucky kid that has the September 3rd birthday is going to get really poor responses from his or her classmates, as opposed to the April birthday kid that, they've done this 8 or 9 or 15 times now, and they're going to get really insightful about. I mean, obviously it's going to be better as the year goes, but is there any type of scaffolding activities before that first birthday so the first birthday is not a disaster?
So I've actually had to do this on the first day of school. And I've still honored that. Like I didn't say like, oh, we do this birthday thing and it's really awesome, but we're going to do it next week because your child's, we're just going to do it. So the scaffolding is that at the very beginning of every day, you have that community circle. So your classroom is your kids are used to coming together, sitting or standing on the carpet, and each participating in a whip around or a connection question. So they're used to that type of communication scenario. And then you also just do human with them. So on the first day of school, it's 2:45, you're getting ready for dismissal. And we always do it at the end of the day, because if you have snacks and things, it just gets chaotic at the end of the day. I actually just lay it out. I'm like, hey, everybody, guess what? It's the first day of school. We've got to celebrate, Victor's birthday. I know this is going to seem crazy because we've been together for one day, but we're going to do this activity that we're going to do for all of you this year. And so we're going to sit here and we're all going to think about one thing that we like about Victor, or something that we notice about Victor that's great. And we're going to say, hey, Victor, what I like best about you is, and I say, and I know that's hard today because it's our first day together, but I need you to show up as your best self, and I'm going to model it. And I say, okay, who wants to go first? And then even on that first day, like 7 kids raise their hands right away, because children get this goodness that you're trying to create, and everyone wants to feel that way. And I think they can understand what it would be like to feel that way. And then they look forward to their birthday. So I think you just have to keep it real with kids and explain it to them like they're an adult, like that first day scenario, and not sugarcoat it or hide it or save it for a week later, and just go for it.
Now, I don't know if you feel this way, but we've heard a lot of people talk about social emotional learning as one of those attributes that were ingrained in their classroom before they knew it was supposed to be ingrained in their classroom. It was just the nature of good teaching. So kind of 2 parts to that question. And especially as an elementary teacher, obviously social emotional learning looks different at that secondary level. And I think there's a better emphasis of how that can be structured. But what are some of those things that before there were, SEL resources, you were going to develop, or where did you get the concept that, you're going to have this morning circle time and you're going to gather at the end of the day? Where were you going to get that kind of structure to make it with substance? And, as it became a thing, did your SEL inclusion in your classroom adjust or change at all?
So very good question. So some of those structures, that circle, community building circle in the morning, a lot of people call it morning meeting in elementary schools. And so that was actually part of my school's culture. So when I came in and I was a student teacher, I observed people doing that. And that was kind of like a non-negotiable, like you would have a morning meeting. And we used a program back then called Responsive Classroom, which I think is part of the Northeast Foundation or Northeast Schools now. But there were components like you'd have a greeting, you'd have an activity, you'd have a share, and you'd have like a message that was written on the board. So over the years, our school transitioned from responsive classroom to a PBIS reward school, incentive school, which is very common. And then we also have restorative practices baked in. So a big part of the restorative practices philosophy, or how you do it, is that you have these proactive community building circles. So the circle is still there. It might be called something different or have a different program name, but it's a very common structure for an elementary school. So I've been fortunate that that's always been in my elementary school. And I don't think I could teach without it, to be quite honest, because kids bring so much in. When I was named the Delaware Teacher of the Year in 2017, I think some of that was around the work I've done around social emotional learning, again, before it was called that. I'll just share a couple of instances. In my first year of teaching, we had a member of the class experience a tragedy in their family. And that was very difficult. It was very hard for me because I was terrified about what to do to support the student as well as the community. And I just decided that instead of ignoring it or pretending it wasn't happening, we were going to like go through our emotions. And we did that in a lot of ways by sharing our emotions, sharing our fears, talking about empathy, and practicing how to support the student that was affected. And then we had this like whole class kind of cathartic activity where we did a fundraiser. We raised money to make a donation to be supportive in light of that difficult circumstance. So those kinds of things just happened in the classroom. Like when I was a first year teacher, I started Girls on the Run at Mount Pleasant Elementary School where I worked. And Girls on the Run is a confidence building program for young girls that teaches them to run a 5K. So that's social emotional learning and an extracurricular activity that was part of a program that already existed. Nobody called it that, but that's certainly what it was. Once I became Teacher of the Year, I started to talk about, my platform was about supporting students impacted by trauma. So I read a lot and learned a lot about that. And that also turned into learning a lot about social emotional learning. And then all of a sudden we knew what social emotional learning was and we were saying it in the classroom. So I did a lot of work around emotions and self-management, giving kids different ways to show their emotions and then manage their emotions in the classroom as our school is becoming a trauma-informed school. So that expertise developed, and now I can easily rattle off the 5 competencies for SEL. You know, it's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, what you mentioned earlier, Ken, and relationship skills. And now there's a lot more curriculum to help you develop those things specifically. I have some practices in my classroom that I use. You know, part of self-management is knowing what to do when you are upset. And in order to know what to do when you're upset, you have to know when you're getting upset. So that ties into self-awareness. And in order to understand what's happening, you have to know more than 4 emotion words like happy, mad, sad, or worried. So you try and increase emotion vocabulary. I use something called SEL signature practices in my classroom. There's 3 of them: joyful, inclusive openings, engaging content and brain breaks, and then optimistic closures. So that's a non-negotiable for me now. My classroom has been for a few years. When I taught college students this past fall, I use that in my college student structure. Works perfectly. I use it in professional development with adults. Those 3 things are essential to having SEL embedded in the space, whatever it is. And it just looks different at different ages. You can and should do it at middle school, and you can and should do it at high school. I want to emphasize that point. It's not, SEL is not just sitting on a carpet with small children, which a lot of people tend to think it is. I just said a lot there. Sorry. I felt like I was rambling a little.
No, it's perfect. And you led right into what I want to ask you is, you know, let's say I'm working, because I'm now a secondary instructional coach, and I'm having a conversation with a teacher. We'll just say a high school, whatever content area teacher. They see the value, they understand the reasoning and the importance of SEL, but it's the question of how do I do this and not take away from my curriculum? So can you say those 3 components again? Joyful opening, optimistic closure. I think I got those, but can you like really kind of dive in and explain what you mean by those, or give an example of each?
So these come from, it's all on the Castle website. So this is a framework called, I think it's called SEL 3 signature practices. Okay. So the first one is joyful, inclusive openings. So what that might look at like is a community circle with a fun question, like what favorite show are you streaming right now? I don't know if you guys have seen them, but during COVID, people made these check-in charts with like on a scale of like sheep, what are you feeling today? And they're hilarious, like squirrels or celebrities, things like that. So it might be like a fun activity like that. With my college students, we actually got into a circle standing up, and I have a talking piece. It's it's a rock that says believe on it. And I say, this is our talking piece, and I'm going to ask you how you're feeling today or what's going on. And we just pass it and talk with it. So when high school and middle school teachers worry about giving up time, I absolutely completely understand that. But I think if you devote 5 minutes to an opening circle like that, you're going to get engagement and joy and belonging and connection tenfold on the other side of it. So just think about it. Think about if you walk into a classroom and someone says, okay, your must-dos are on the board and here's your worksheet. And you're like, crap, I just had, someone, I don't know, did something on Snapchat, or I just failed a test, or I'm having a problem with my parents or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my friends. You just need like a moment to be human. So that's the opener. So I'd say give up the 5 to get back a lot of engagement and connection. And then during instruction, you got to go to your engagement strategies. How are you engaging kids in learning? I will tell you that something I've learned over the past 12 years is that whenever possible, I let kids work together. They want to work together. They want to have partners. They want to be in groups. Sometimes it doesn't work out well because of dynamics or their lagging skills, but they want to work together. So I will almost always let kids work together or have a choice about that. And again, I think that creates connections. And you can say things like, hey, we're going to break into groups of 3. When you get in your group of 3, shortest person start and give the next tallest person a compliment. And then that person give the next tallest person a compliment. And you go around and you say, hey, I like your red shirt before you get working. You can do that at any age. Brain breaks I do every hour. And they can be energy up or energy down. And I kind of read the room or the vibe. Sometimes kids need to get up and like do like a rock, paper, scissors tournament, or do like one of those videos where they're like jogging when they answer different questions about pizza or something. And sometimes I need to turn the lights down and give everyone like a mindful coloring 5-minute soft music break, that kind of thing. And then that optimistic closure just gives us permission to close on a good note on the worst day. Right. So I have a schedule. I do a different one every day of the week. So my optimistic, and I just made these up myself. These are just activities that I figured out myself. On Monday, it's always what went well. And we pass the talking piece and everyone has a chance to say what went well. And it could just be like recess or like the sun is out or whatever. They can say whatever they want. They can pass too. I don't ever force kids to participate. And then on Tuesday, it's always 3 good things. Can you name 3 good things from the day? And I explain what that is. We learn it before we, normalize it. On Wednesday, we do an activity called the 3 A's, which is appreciation, apology, or an aha in your learning. So I don't know what kind of, we want that environment where a child can apologize for something that went wrong during the day. Sometimes they apologize to me. Sometimes they'll apologize to a student about an issue at recess. Sometimes they'll share their aha light bulb moment in their learning. And sometimes they'll appreciate someone. Thursdays, I do shout outs. Okay. And anyone can shout out. And I make the rule they can't shout me out because they would all shout me out. And I'm like, no, you have to shout each other out. And then on Friday, the prompt is, what are you looking forward to? Because we're on the verge of a weekend and there might be things going on. So those are my 5. Castle has a list, I think, of the, activities that they could do, or you can make up your own. But the value in having the 5 is that they always know what they're going to be. There's that consistency there. And we close positively, again, even on the worst of days.
So I really like those kind of thoughts and the structure of it, and even as you talked about the optimistic closure, like how you end a tough and challenging day, in a positive light, I think is super. It starts off on the right foot. And I view, going into my 4th grade class tomorrow, incorporating some of these things, we have many similarities in the sense of like, we have a morning meeting. And so we have these attributes. I don't use closing circles as part of responsive classroom as maybe productively as I should. I guess one of the things that is sticking out to me is in your privilege of being able to go across the state of Delaware and talk about SEL and just this journey of SEL. SEL for many of us sounds so obvious in so many ways. So what are those attributes? Maybe it's these three practices, but what are those other attributes that you feel like really stuck out that were beyond just common sense when it comes to the incorporation of community and the ways that you really used an example around trauma that obviously represents how did you proactively handle a situation. What are some other kind of attributes towards talking to other educators about the value of SEL when a lot of the principles are just I could read bullet points and be like, yep, that makes sense. But not really value it or ingrain it in my classroom.
So that's such a good question. And I want to go back to something Ken said. Ken, you mentioned you're an instructional coach, I think at the high school level. So all of this makes perfect sense, right? We all nod our heads and be like, yes, we want our kids to get along and be optimistic and everything. We need structure and we have to stick to it. So those three principles really create a framing that you can stick to. And if you have a planning tool, you can write in your community building question for every morning. I don't have to write down my optimistic closures because I have a schedule for every week. And so I think the problem that I see in how we prepare teachers is we don't really teach teachers what SEL is, right, explicitly. And then they come to classrooms and they're like, but how? How do I do this? Yes, I want to do this. I want my kids to get along. And particularly at the middle and high school level, I don't have time. There's always this pressure for pacing. So those three signature practices I mentioned, that's the how. And so that's the framework. And that's going to take away well, I can't do this. I teach honors biology. I have no time. I teach, reading intervention. I don't have time. There's always time to start and end a class in a positive community building way. And then you really have to look deep inside with your engagement strategies. And do you even use brain breaks? And if you need help with engagement strategies, that's when you reach out to your coach or to your team or to your principal and say, can we have this training? Or you pursue training on your own. I mean, so many things that I learned, I just did on my own time or learned from Twitter or signed up for PD on my own. So this is, to me, the how, because everyone pretty much gets the why. Most people get the why. And like you said, that common sense piece, you don't have to do a lot of, you don't have to put forth a lot of effort talking about that. It's the how. And people are like, I want to do this, but I don't know how, or I'm pressed for time how. So I think this framework and then sticking to it, I hate with fidelity, but sticking to it and doing it every day. And even, some days you get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh crap, I only have 5 minutes for a closing circle. And I'm like, guys, hey, we're almost out of time. We've got to do our closing circle. It's going to be a 3-word thing today. Even when it's not ideal or you run out of time or there's a fire drill and I don't know, something gets messed up, you still have to say it or say, oh, we missed our closing circle today because we had a guest speaker that went over, but guess what? Tomorrow we're going to do, we'll think about yesterday in our morning reflection, something like that. So you have to stick to it. You have to hold yourself accountable because nobody else is going to check on you that you're doing it. Right. And I think over time you see the benefits and it gives you confidence. So my mission in my next chapter is going to be, I want to foster curiosity, confidence, and competence in SEL. And so I do train people in exactly what it is, how to get better at it yourself, and then how to implement it in the classroom. And the ultimate goal is that integration. You do have to explicitly teach skills, but then you have to create opportunities for the kids to practice the skills while they're doing academics. Another quick example, I had second graders last year, we were doing a math unit on measurement. So they were actually using yardsticks to measure things. So we were going to go out into the recess yard and they were going to measure playground equipment with a partner with the yardsticks and record things in their journal. So they're going out into the real world and using these tools. They were put into pairs, and I put a slide up on the in the front on the smartboard that had expectations. And I said, here's the math skills we're going to practice, and here's the SEL skills we're going to practice. Getting along with a partner, managing yourself with a large tool like a yardstick. If I see you playing with it or not managing it, I'm taking it away. You're not going to be able to use that yardstick. And then doing your job where you're writing down at least 5 things you measure in the measurement in your journal so that you have met the criteria for this task, which is to practice. And then they, I kind of started to use that framework. Like, we're starting a science experiment with partners. Here's our science skills. We're doing bridges in engineering, and here's our SEL skills. And then after a while, like, again, you mentioned like things look better in April. By around January, I'm like, what SEL skills are we working on? And raise your hand. And they start to say, oh, well, we're going to work on getting along. And can we start it with a compliment today? Or, if I'm working with someone and they do something nice, can I put a ball in the kindness jar in the middle of the science experiment? And I'm like, sure. So over time, it becomes embedded in your culture and happens automatically.
So you you mentioned your next chapter. So I'd love for you to share with our audience and talk about, what you've learned, what you've gained from your last couple of years in relation to education and some of the professional moves you've made.
Sure. Thank you. So there's a good story I'll start back with. So in 2017, I attended a training in Delaware that the authors of Fostering Resilient Learners were presenting. So that's a book about trauma. And at the end of the training, I went up to the authors and I said, I love your book and it really has changed my life and my outlook. And I totally fangirled them. Like, I was like, can I take a selfie? Can you sign my book? Like, I was ridiculous. And they played along. They were great. And I went back and I did those things in my classroom that I was learning. About a year later, they contacted me and they said they were coming to the state of Delaware. Could we meet for dinner? They wanted to see if I would work for them and eventually be a trainer for them. So that was a really special moment. And I take it right back to that moment when I was fangirling. Don't be afraid to fangirl, fanboy someone, because you never know what's going to happen. And when you put your passion out there, people remember. So for about 4 years, I have been a trainer for them, and I'm able to travel around the country or during COVID do Zoom trainings with people in different states around trauma and social emotional learning. This summer, I was in Texas and in Chicago in August, for like an in-service keynote, that kind of thing. So now, as I'm out of the classroom and I'm continuing to consult for them, I'm going to begin my own consulting business where I teach, really work with schools and districts around social emotional learning training and coaching. I'm just getting started right now. And I also plan to write a book on social emotional learning. And what I want to do is I want to talk about like the what and the how, and just share some of the creative strategies I've used in my classroom over the year and some of these moves that always with the goal of moving towards competence. So you can be really interested in it and not have any competence. You can think it's great, but not know how to do it. So I want to move towards creating competence in social emotional learning in educators, because I think that's a gap we still have in like the way we prepare teachers. And it ends up being this thing that can create equity issues, right? Because what does a classroom look like where a teacher's really competent or curious or confident in this versus a classroom where they're not? That impacts kids in different ways.
All right, I'm going to ask a tough question. I hope that's okay. So you talked about the what of social emotional learning and the how. And because the what is so obvious, a lot of teachers, oh, I'm already doing that, giving themselves credit. And so you have sometimes, how do I do that with fidelity, as you were kind of mentioning before? But we're getting to the point that it is so common in our lingo that teachers already believe that they know social emotional learning. We've been flooded with this term recently, and especially coming out of the pandemic, and what teaching looks like in these days. What do you think the future years of under the term social emotional learning looks like to keep the focus on care for kids, and less so a check mark in a lot of our teachers who may still love to learn, not acting like they know it all, but what are those next steps to say, this is where social emotion that instruction will grow to and continue to enhance and kind of mesh with our responsibilities as teachers?
So there's a few things there. I think if we're not evaluated on it as teachers, it's not given a big priority sometimes. I think that it has to be something that is talked about and looked for in our system, right? So we focus obsessively on testing and curriculum and things like that. If people are thinking about building this into their system, there has to be some type of reflection on it. Do you see it? Do you see these moves. And I think there's got to be this like tight definition of it. So over the years, I've had people be like, oh my gosh, I do SEL. Like we do gratitude and we're kind and we do talk to students about agency and stuff. But SEL is 5 core competencies, right? So even having that common understanding of what the 5 core competencies are that come from CASEL, and that is the, they're the authoritative body on social emotional learning and the research that's behind it. I don't know if they think they know what it is, or they're like, I'm doing it, but are you really? Do you know what the 5 competencies are? Do you know how to teach them explicitly? And do you know how to embed them into your academic, whether you're teaching kindergarten reading intervention or AP US history at a high school level, right? And so I don't think we're there yet. And so you see some systems have more of an emphasis on it, or some just individual teachers have more of an emphasis on it, or a building does a book study and then they get like really into it. There are programs like Leader in Me that have elements that support the competencies. But I think there has to be, I would just like to see like this universal understanding of it. I'd love to see teachers coming out of prep with it. And then being taught as much as the pedagogy behind teaching a measurable skill, just those moves that I was talking about, being taught that so they know how to do it in the classroom. And I think we're getting there. I think it's, we have progress. We saw how important it was during COVID. I had to learn how to do a lot of these things on Zoom too, which was just insane. But that work and how hard it was, and my own growth mindset being activated and pushing myself has brought it back into the classroom in a stronger way since then, if that makes any sense. So the other thing too, I will mention is that we have to focus on the skill development in adults, right? So unless we can authentically understand it, do it, model it, then we're not going to be able to have it authentically come alive in our classrooms and have our kids understand it. There's a great, there's a great case study that comes, Lorea Martinez is one of the authors, and it's one of my favorite pieces of literature. Can't remember the organization it comes out of, but it talks about the conditions for having social emotional learning work in schools. And one of the biggest criteria is that adults are involved in their own social emotional development, and that they have power in the professional development around it, and they have a voice in how it's done. So that happens some places and doesn't happen in other places. And so I think you'll see all kinds of scenarios for years to come, but there's more focus on it.
So I guess, just continuing that, you mentioned having the opportunity to talk to, teach teachers in addition to when you were in the classroom. One of the big discrepancies that we all know is, unfortunately, the undergraduate or, post-bac work that you went through after, you'd already had a second career is so much theory about a classroom without real practice. And I agree with what you're saying. I feel like seeing SEL being embedded in that teaching curriculum in the college level is a true sign that it's an emphasis of education. But I also think that it's a really difficult thing to, we could define the what and the 5 major components, but the how has always been a difficult thing in teacher prep. And that's, instruction, that's classroom management. All features are, I remember being like, oh, I'll give the teacher stare and that'll get my kids to work, because I didn't have actual kids I was basing it off of. So how do you kind of frame the development of that how when at the college level, future teachers haven't yet had kids? They've babysat, or they had, high school experiences where they're in classrooms. How do you make that development of the how in those positions as valuable so that it does continue to support the work of, all of us to make it a pillar in our classroom?
So, I just think we need to be brave. I think we need to be really brave and think innovatively and break it up and reassemble it. Like, I don't want there to be a class called classroom management. I don't want people to think that I am going to manage little cogs and control them with my system or this and that, the other thing. I want that class to be called classroom culture and student engagement. And I want, and through the work of Pete Hall and Kristen Sowers, who are the authors of Fostering Resilient Learners, how do you create a culture that's safe? Because when you create a trauma-invested culture, a safe culture, it benefits everyone. It benefits kids going through trauma and kids who are not going through trauma. It's just good practices. So I personally don't love that term, classroom management. And when you talk about things we need to do, like add SEL, people might say, oh, well, we can't add that. The course level is full. I said, well, why don't we take these 2 courses, pull them out, break them up into these 6 pieces, throw away these pieces, bring this in and call it something else. Like that's what I would do. But I definitely have like an innovator's mindset because I am in a classroom and I figure things out all the time. Looking at those big systems is such a different, difficult thing. But that's, just change. And being like really brave and saying like, and talking to teachers in classrooms who are doing it. So that's where, the input's coming from.
What's a sustainable path for a school to roll this out? So if they want to really change the mindset behind SEL and develop an understanding of what SEL really is, because I'll fully admit I wouldn't have been able to name the 5 frameworks or the 5 components. So, but time is so valuable. One, the curriculum time, but also the professional development time that we have with teachers is so valuable. So what is you're probably gonna have to simplify it, but what would be kind of a sustainable, systematic approach to, let's say, over the next 3 years to really redefine what SEL looks like in our school?
So the first thing you do is you take those 3 signature practices and you embrace them in your staff-facing activities, right? So all your staff-facing activities, you start to build that culture with your joyful, inclusive openings, your engaging content, and your optimistic closures. You do that with staff first, and you create those staff connections and that trust among the staff. And then I think you need a plan. So you can definitely get a curriculum for SEL, right? And sometimes counselors roll out the curriculum, or it's like some standalone module that kids do online or something. But you say, we're going to adopt this curriculum, and in addition to having those like standalone lessons during advisement or during morning meeting or something, we're going to look at a framework for how we're going to embed this into instruction. So if you're at middle school and high school and you're teaching 45-minute classes or the block, you say this is what we're going to do. We're going to start doing these joyful welcoming activities. We're going to work on our engagement and our brain breaks, and we're going to close optimistically. And I think that you also need to survey adults and students in your school. You need to take surveys at the beginning of the year, like kind of like, where are you emotionally? Now, you don't have to screen by name and know who's feeling this or who's feeling that, but you have to like understand the pulse of your community. So say you took a staff survey, how are you doing? What do you need? This kind of thing. Do you know what SEL is? And you could say, okay, well, like half of our staff is feeling stressed out before we even begin the school year. That's something that needs to be addressed. Or 1/3 of our staff knows what SEL is, has an idea, but 2/3 doesn't, And I think then you use tools like, as a coach, you come in PLC support, right? So you come in and do a round of PLCs for a week, and then you could be coaching in classrooms. And I'm actually doing some work with Elena Aguilar's Bright Morning website. Her model's called Transformational Coaching. I'm working on that this quarter as I get ready to, launch my consulting endeavor. And you start that coaching where you're looking for these things. You ask people what they need help with. You build that trust, and you all connect in your humanity around this. But you have a plan and you have a framework, and you get that expertise support. Because even a lot of principals and administrators haven't been trained specifically in how to see this. Like they are, working on culture and things like that, but culture is so many things. So I think if you want this to come alive and be, you have to say it out loud, name it, and then have specific moves to make it grow.
For sure. And I think you hit on one of the hardest things with implementing new systems, new instructional practices. Small group learning is a big one that we, as an instructional team, we've been pushing, especially at this. It's really been running for a long time, very successfully in the elementary level. So we're just making moves to make it a little bit better, more engaging, what have you. But at the secondary level, it's really getting that off the ground and running. And there are some administrators in our district who are fantastic principals who have never taught in a small group setting and have never observed a successful small group lesson. So a lot of it is they need to invest in key assets of people, whether it be other teachers in the district, the instructional coaches, outside consultants, to really help educate themselves and drive that at least initially forward. So it takes a principal that has a lot of confidence in themselves to be humble and to say, this is way outside of my expertise. I can read all about it, but I need to see someone else put it into practice, at least initially. And I think SEL falls in that same column. It's much more than just having good relationships with your kids. So a segment we like to do once in a while, and we honestly haven't done it in a while, is called our lesson lens. And it's an opportunity to look at a very specific lesson or a project that you have done with your students. So we're going to throw this at you, Wendy, because I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. So you can literally talk about anything you've ever done teaching a classroom, whether it be your second graders, college students, professionals, whatever you want. So Matt and I have different questions that will kind of walk you through and guide you through sharing about that lesson. So question number 1, is it a unit overview, a long-term project, or a single lesson?
Project.
All right. So since there are options, grade level, subject area, and was it time of year specific?
So I did it in second grade, but you could do it at other grade levels. Not time of year specific. What was the other one?
Subject area, if there was anything specific.
So multidisciplinary, reading, language arts, writing, science, the environment, citizenship.
The whole package.
Citizenship, yeah.
Awesome. What were the objectives of the lesson?
Okay. So the objectives of the lesson is to take part in a project-based learning experience called the Unless Contest at the Philadelphia Zoo, where children are challenged to learn about an endangered species and climate change, and then create a local project that will benefit the environment and present that and the impact for it. So I am a facilitator of that.
So speaking kind of those student roles, can you kind of speak specifically to what in the different phases the students actively do throughout the project?
Yeah, so it's a long project. It's many months. It's like my heart, this project. I've done it for like 7 years. It's free to enter for anybody. So what we do is we learn about the Unless Contest, and I tell the kids we're going to learn about endangered species. We're going to have a Zoom meeting with someone from the Philadelphia Zoo, an expert, and we're going to choose an animal to research, and we're going to figure out a project to do. So you actually sign up and you go on a Zoom and you learn about 5 different endangered species, like a golden lion tamarin, a Rodriguez fruit bat, a Panamanian golden frog. There was 2 more. And so we go on that Zoom and we all sit and listen and we ask questions. And after that, I ask the class to vote on what animal they'd like to research. And they vote, and that vote wins. That's the first lesson in democracy, really, and citizenship in our classroom. Once they pick the animal, I tell them that we're going to write a story. We're going to write a story, and that animal is going to be a character. But since you're second graders and you're experts in story elements, you're going to figure out the setting, the problem, the solution, the characters, and it has to do with problems with the environment. So I, again, am a facilitator. We do tons of like sticky note brainstorming, like names of characters, problem, solution, settings. I mean, they come up with crazy things. And I kind of go through the ideas and I say, okay, it sounds like we're going to write a story about a Humboldt penguin named Zippy. He and his friend Piper are going to clean up the ocean because they found tons of plastic bags floating in it and they can't eat anything and they're hungry. And we outline a story. I give each child, if there's 20 kids in the class, we read a 20-page story. They each get an idea for a page. They write a page, 1 or 2 sentences, and we put it all together. And I kind of, again, ask the facilitator, like, do you need a word there? Is that right? Is that right? And then they each illustrate a page. And we put a big book together. It's about this big. It's like half the size of a poster board. And we record it on YouTube. And we try and get 500 views. And the story teaches people about climate change, about the animal they research, and about a problem. One year, they were fighting against balloon waste because there was a bill in Delaware limiting balloon releases because plastic balloon waste, the mylar, ends up in phone lines and in streams and trees. And so the penguin was fighting the balloon waste. This past year it was not penguins. Oh, yeah, it was penguins again this year, and they were cleaning up Target trash bags and things in the ocean. And they were asking local lawmakers to pass a bill to have no more plastic bags and all this stuff. At the same time, we did something in our school. What can we do in our school? Guys, what do you think we should do in our school? Can we collect plastic bags? Yes, we can. So we set up some bins. We collect plastic bags. I found out about a local business that takes donations of plastic to make recycled benches. I play a little YouTube video. The kids see them. We do a math day where we count the bags. It was like 1,000 bags. It was chaos, but they put them in groups and tied them up in tens. Then we added up all the tens together and we estimated we had 1,000 plastic bags. One year, this was the best. Kids would get breakfast in the classroom and they'd bring it in this plastic bag. And people were commenting like, what a waste. We don't need these bags. And so I asked the kids what we could do. And they said, well, could we just put the breakfast in a carry basket, like a reusable carry basket? I said, sure. So I said, let's do this. Let's ask the school, when kids get their plastic bag, count the number of seconds or minutes that you use that bag before it goes in the trash. And some kids, we had a big poster in the hallway. Some kids only had the breakfast in the bag for 5 or 10 seconds. And then it went in the trash. So we collected all this data and I helped them organize it. And they realized that these bags were being used for very short amounts of time. So I said, what could we do? What could we do? Could we get caddies? Okay. Where could you get a caddy? I see you at the dollar store. Okay. I said, I'll set up a meeting with the principal and the nutrition person from the district office. Can you tell them your idea and show them your data? Yes. They sat at tables with the nutrition director and the principal. I actually was in the back of the room and they showed them the data and they said, can you buy these caddies so we don't have to use the plastic bags? And they said, yes. So then I was like, breaking news, second graders just convinced district nutrition person and principal to change breakfast carrying policy. And so they ordered up all the bags and they gave every classroom like 15 of those caddies and they would just keep them by the breakfast carts in the hallway and they'd come in and stack them up. And you'd have a helper like give them back to the cafeteria at the end of the day. Done. We get 500 views on our book and we got a free field trip to Philadelphia Zoo. So they were authors, they were citizens of the world, they were researchers, science, citizenship, reading, writing standards. I had to submit everything to the Philadelphia Zoo every year. We won the contest one year and we were finalists very many years. So just something the kids will never forget. And isn't it a lot more fun for me to teach like reading and writing standards that way than to do it another way. So that was my favorite. I have like 5 giant books in the basement now.
That's
that
awesome.
I keep.
So we have 2 more questions, but before I ask any, I just want to say, so Matt and I, this is like a game time decision whether or not we do the lesson lens. And Matt, I was spot on to say we should do the lesson lens tonight because this is awesome. I love stories like this. Just when you get to the point of pitching something to administrators, that is like the holy grail of projects because it's just so cool for students of any age to see there's going to be a change or not a change. And maybe the pitch doesn't go well. Principals shouldn't feel compelled that they have to say yes because the students have gotten the courage to ask for something. And I'm sure long-term the school's actually going to save money by having those caddies versus the bags. So you've alluded to it a little bit, but the next question is during the process of this, during the specific lessons where these things are happening, if you could boil it down, what would you say was your key role in managing the success of the students reaching the objectives?
Again, having a plan, a step-by-step plan and adhering to it, being organized going in. If I didn't have an idea of what this looked like, you could never do it. People said to me, how do you do this? I don't understand how you do this. I'd be so overwhelmed. You could be, but I had the confidence and then the plan to do it. Like I have almost like, here's what we do in November, here's what we do in December, here's what we do in January, here's what we do in February. And it tied in with Common Core standards we were learning in reading, the 5 W's, things like that. So just being super organized and being confident. And if you're not sure how to do it, like stopping, reflecting, asking, believing you can do it. I just had a growth mindset, I think, to do that. And then I can model that for my kids. Like, hey, I wasn't sure how we were going to do this, guys, but guess what? We just wrote a book. And so you have to like tease out these moments where you're modeling this SEL, these skills. Like that's a growth mindset moment as a teacher, I think.
Well, I think bringing up growth mindset is super huge because, again, there are ways to make that instructionally valid. Like you said, you taught these ELA and science standards. to validity, I don't know why we're using that word, consistently. That keeps on coming out of my mouth, but you're doing a very sufficient job, if not better than a traditional. All right, here's an isolated writing activity. Here's an isolated reading activity. Here's an isolated science activity. Using that PBL, project-based learning, to really enhance the experience.
Well, there's time and place for those standalone activities, and I had to do a lot of them to get us ready to do this activity. So I want to stress that you don't want to abandon curriculum or your traditional things, but you have like this blend, and you have them live together. And I would just put this under if I go back to tie it into the 3 signature practices, this is a very good example of student engagement, right? So they're going to be way more engaged if we're writing a story, but we do have those standalone reading activities. But this is a way to depart from that a little bit and generate some excitement.
Well, I think, project-based learning is not a sustainable teaching practice we can live in very often. It's not necessarily culmination, but it's the growth of learning. So the last question really comes down to the dream of, it sounds like you brought this to a variety of big extents, within the 4 walls of your building, with meeting with your administrator to make change. Obviously, the experience with Philadelphia Zoo. Is there anything that you kind of wished it could extend even further to, or any changes you would want to make if you were to do this project going forward?
Not really. And I know that other teachers have done the contest and the project since I started doing it. That's the best thing, that more people were trying to do it. I think this would be a wonderful thing that a whole school could do, right? So like, what would this look like if a whole school was doing this? As I mentioned before, I'm not in the classroom, but I looked on Facebook the other day, and another 2nd grade teacher in my building was doing this project, and he made this incredible video with his students, like embedded into a video, and the district had shared it on their Facebook page. And I just commented, like, this warms my heart. I'm not there any longer, but I'm seeing you doing this project. Your kids will never forget this. And that is the mark of that's success, that just seeing more people do it, and the kids having that. I was so happy.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's something, one, that, outlines just ideas for how you can incorporate project-based learning in your classroom, but also a specific resource, which I will link up in the show notes for this to the Philadelphia Zoo activity. And I'm sure if Emma, I'll let you jump in. I'm sure if you look at any local aquarium, local zoo, local national park, they all have activities like this that you can really dive into to keep it local, so it's a little bit more exciting for your kids. If you're on the West Coast, it might be a little bit less exciting for them to be involved with something at the Philadelphia Zoo.
I was just going to add, exactly what you just kind of said. There are tons of avenues, and the other thing, like you said, you had the opportunity to meet with a specialist from the Philadelphia Zoo. There are ways, even if it's not formally set up, it may not even be a competition. There are plenty of professionals that would love to incorporate their professional, knowledge into your classroom. So don't hesitate.
Can I mention a resource? There's a resource called Skype a Scientist. It's a website, and you can actually go on that, and that you get people to come into your classroom, and you can tie it into whatever science topic you're learning. And that's another great one.
I know I've mentioned this before that, I've even used my personal Facebook page. We were doing a weather unit, and I was like, hey, does anyone know a meteorologist?
Exactly.
And, we've met with Native Americans, pilots, electricians, all these things that directly connect into our curriculum just by word of mouth, because guess what? People kind of love, having impact on especially young kids.
They do.
They'll bend over backwards for you.
This has been a fantastic conversation. So we're going to wrap this up with the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. We never skip this segment. It's called our exit ticket. So question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
They can grow their own social, emotional learning skills and learn how to stay calm and regulated and make connections and get through difficult situations.
So you're giving great advice with that, but what is the best piece of advice that you have received, and that could have been from a colleague, supervisor, or even a student?
Let's see. I don't think it's advice, but I'm going to say that I've had students ask me, like, are you okay, Mrs. Turner? And that just stopped me cold in my tracks because it told me that I wasn't okay and the kids could tell. So I think the advice is listen to students when they ask you questions or if they say things to you because like they know.
I love it. It's so true. It lets you know that they are watching you and listening to you, and that you have a valued equal partnership and friendship in your students and in you.
You spend a tremendous amount of time, and especially us and elementary level, that rhythm will if that's interrupted, it's noticeable. I'm sure in a second grade classroom quite a bit. So kind of following up on that, we understand the school year goes in waves. There are times where things are light and easy, easy, generous term, I guess. But there are also more challenging times that we struggle to kind of get through. What's something you feel like you could share with those educators that you haven't already, or, you could repeat that would help them power up through those moments of struggle?
So I think save like your most engaging, awesome projects for tough times of year. Like I always think March is tough, right? Going into spring break. And that's when we would do like a big research project, or we were doing bridges and engineering and we'd have the kids like make a model of a bridge. Like, so save those really awesome projects for that tough time of year where things can just get tricky. And when things are tough, like don't be afraid to just have a problem solving circle and be like, hey, the energy's off in here. We're not doing well. We're not getting along. What is going on? Like, don't be afraid to circle up and ask the kids what's going on. And they have a lot of insights. So, and also I think survey your kids, like every quarter, what did you like best? What tech tool do you like? What did you not like? Like constantly ask for feedback from the people you serve, which is your students and your families. And pivot from the feedback, listen to it, internalize it, and do something with it.
Our last question. It's so easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates the teachers who are the ones constantly seeking change, innovation, and new teaching strategies?
So they're the ones that they don't want to get bored either. They want to make things exciting. They want to learn. They want to grow. So they want to take chances. And so if you have that mindset, you'll just keep bringing things in and trying things. And that's how I want it to be. So there's a risk there because it can not work or blow up or just be terrible. But you have to try. So I think just remain a lifelong learner and try things. Just try. Keep trying new things.
Totally agree. So you have many adventures, in your career upcoming. What is the best way that our audience can continue to follow along and keep track of your growth and kind of exploration of being a resource in SEL and other, educational topics?
So my social media, I'm most active on Twitter, and I have a Facebook page called, I think it's Wendy Turner, 2017 Delaware Teacher of the Year. I am on LinkedIn, and please email me, wendymturner@gmail.com. I have a collection on Wakelet. Wakelet's a curation tool of all my blogs and podcasts. So if you head over to there and just find me, I think it's Mrs. Wendy M. Turner, you can see all my things there. And people sometimes will read a blog and then email me and be like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm not sure how to get started. Or can you tell me a little bit more about that? So I answer every email I get. I get emails from teachers around the world, actually, at times. So please just reach out. And I love to stay connected to people who are doing the work right now. So look for me on social. I haven't conquered Instagram yet. And I feel very bad about that because I know there's like a billion teachers on Instagram, but like, how you get to this point where you're like, okay, I just can't add one more thing. Or, I know there's teachers on TikTok, like it's all awesome, but I can only do like 3 things. So I'll just say like, even my email is the best, wendymturner@gmail.com. Yes. So it's at Mrs. Wendy M. Turner. Make sure the M is in there. So I'm on there, and I'm known for sharing a lot of resources around social emotional learning, and same thing on my Facebook page. Right now, I actually have, I put out on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn this morning, I'm going to do a series of webinars on SEL in the first quarter of 2023 as a way to kick off my consulting business. They're free. And so if you check me out on social, there's a link to register for those, and I'd welcome anyone to those. And I just want to keep doing that work as I'm kind of putting other things into motion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm super glad that you were so cordial with us when we canceled on you. Matt, I don't know if you remember this, but we canceled on Wendy because we were both going to the World Series game for the Phillies. But luckily we had a local one with us. So I
can respect that.
Absolutely. So this has been a fantastic conversation. I've had so much fun. Everything that you talked about, some of the resources I've been jotting down as we've been recording, as well as your email, your Facebook page, your Wakelet, and your Twitter handle, we will link to all of that on our show notes, as well as just the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. If this is the first time you're listening, please consider hitting the subscribe button, whether you're watching us or listening to us, because Matt and I have the pleasure of sitting down and talking to amazing educators like Wendy every week. And we just want as many teachers as possible to hear their stories, hear their passions, hear their lessons and projects, and their advice that they have to offer others. So Wendy, thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck as you continue through your educational journey. And if you ever need anything from us or we can collaborate, I would absolutely love to do that with you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Matt and Ken. I appreciate it. And I hope you both have a great week.
Thank you. Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
So as we power down this episode, Wendy, you definitely left us feeling powered up. Really appreciate the time. And to those who listen, look forward to the conversation next week. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.